No, the first question is, what's your view of the current ICS cybersecurity defenses? And what I'm asking there is based on what I was talking about there. You know, is it a gap? I mean, are we not protected to the level we should be? And if not, why not? That kind of stuff, just general.
At PAS, we view cybersecurity in a similar manner as we do safety. No matter how much you do, you have to expect that at some point there will be a breach. There will be an excursion, as we call it in safety, and you have to be prepared to deal with that. And there's, on the wide scale of unprepared to totally prepared, there's a wide range, and we see different companies at different stages. There's always room for improvement. I think there's some misperceptions about what is ICS cybersecurity at the OT layer, and I think this panel here is very well qualified to talk through some of that. But inherently, the gap that we see, where it exists the most, obviously, is the area where we play,
Of course.
surprisingly. And that is deep in the bowels of the control systems. What configuration do I have, and what happens if someone internally inadvertently makes the wrong move on one of my controls, or someone gets through the firewall and gets to my safety shutdown system? How do I detect that, and how do I respond to that? Those are the key issues, the major gaps that we see in the ICS cybersecurity. Nate?
Hey, thanks. So, hi folks, Nate Kuby, CTO at World Tech. So I think, Sid, I think it's a fantastic question. Look, industrial productivity is down since 2011, down to 1% from 4%. Everyone's looking to get more for less. One of the things that folks realize is that connectivity drives the ability of machines to optimize. Optimization can lower costs, can add to revenue, affect the bottom line. With connectivity comes cyber risk. And so I think, yes, industrial facilities are in a changing environment. Yes, they're connecting more. Yes, they need to adopt technologies that enable them to connect safely and securely. So I think it is an interesting time. I think there's a lot of new technologies. I look forward to exploring them today.
Okay.
Barak Perlman, CEO and co-founder of Indegik, and I want to focus on the gap question and our perception on why the gap essentially exists, because we see a lot of improvement in industrial facilities in recent years, and I think the main reason is that the driving force for security, at least, was from the IT security personnel, and that's why most of the measures that you mentioned in your presentations are kind of IT security measures. And this leaves a very big gap. I think the guys from PAS also talked about it as well, which is the control layer gap, which the IT personnel don't know, are not aware, don't understand how to deal with it. And I think that's the main gap, something that adheres to the control system itself, that monitors and assists you to protect the control layer, because one of the biggest gaps that disturbed me personally in the presentation that you gave is that even if you put all the defense measures in place, all the antiviruses and all the firewalls, if you think in the end about the person that comes every day to the facility, he, by walking, bypasses all of these security measures. He sits behind the DMZ and can do whatever he wants there. So that's the biggest gap. I think what's going on within the DCS, the PLCs, the RTUs in the network, because they are essentially ones that are responsible for managing the lifecycle of your industrial operation, and that's the main gap. And obviously that's what we focus on.
No, so you agree with Eddie. I don't know if you two know you agree, but I think you do. Okay. Shmuley?
Hi, Shmuley Karan, CEO of Next9. First of all, third of this panel is about at midnight. It's in
That's
Israel
right.
for Barak and myself. So please speak sorry, not very loudly so we can sleep, okay? Thank you. So to your question, we see actually two waves happening. One, of course, in the national level and kind of the legislation and regulation. And we see also the corporates, the board members and the management aware of what is happening. So as a result of that, at least with Next9, we see much more activity and much more activities measured, you know, in deals, in RFPs, in RFIs, Still, way to go, but we see much more intensive activity. Of course, the oil gas is affecting this activity as well. And maybe at the second angle to that, the end customer needs to see an ROI. Okay, so how do you measure this ROI? We have actually published together with partners that we work with, be it Cisco and Yokogawa at one of our first-tier oil and gas companies that actually is present also in this conference, that we could save for that enterprise about $700,000 per plant per year, doing a kind of a security maturity improvement and a better secure access, segmented and very granular one. So I think, and another use case for showing ROI was looking at doing a manual kind of work, asset discovery and patching. This is the work that we did together with Accenture, and moving from a manual kind of work to a semi-automatic with some management tool, one can save maybe the cost from 28 for, this was a mid-size oil and gas company, and the cost was cut from $28 million to $40 million, and the length of the process from 2 years to 8 months. So this is a kind of an ROI that the organization can relate to and maybe act upon in budget, in activities, and actually implementing things into the field.
Okay.
Thank you. Is this working?
Is that on? It should be. Shmulik was just
You know, it's really hard for a government guy to be heard around here. Am I? Check. Hey,
Yes.
there we go.
That's a good one.
I may never shut up now. In thinking about the answer to this question, I had a lot of different factors running through my head, and I'm going to reflect something that you said down here. In the work that we do at DHS with assessments and seeing cybersecurity throughout all sectors, including industrial interests, we see a lot of different, a lot of different levels of security. And we always say that if you feel like you're about to go out and spend millions of dollars on equipment and upgrade your technology, that's fine. But before you spend a lot of money on that technology, you might want to spend less money and upgrade your policies and procedures and make sure that you're doing the, grabbing that low-hanging fruit first, because in many cases, even with low-tech, or shall we say low-tech, legacy systems in someone's plant that may not have been built for security, they can still configure those systems in such a way as to achieve a good level of security following the proper, our proper recommendations. But it's the policies and procedures and personnel that are their first line of defense. Over the years, we've seen the actual scores, and this is anecdotal, come up using our cybersecurity evaluation tool, and we go out and visit folks. Security is taking a much bigger role in what is being done out there, but invariably the first place that we find flaws is in the policies and procedures world. So I kind of wanted to give you a little different angle on the answer to that particular question. Thank you.
Sid, I'm sorry I've forgotten the question. Yeah, it's in front of me. Not really. I want to answer my own question. So, hi everybody, good afternoon. My name is Tyler Williams. I actually do not have the role of PCD IT security lead for Shell any longer. I'm a global technology lead. So security will be one portfolio in the technology platforms that we'll be using in the future. And I think that transition for me individually is going to help me frame my answer to these questions. Because if you go back, if you would humor me and go back to your slide where you have the cost increasing over time of all this stuff, I'd like to ask any of the end users in the room, how many believe that the cost of the stuff that Sid has shown on the first, I think it was Defend, whatever the first one was, all of the patching, all of the antivirus, how many believes that's a low cost? It's an incredibly, extraordinarily high cost. And our view might be a little different. We may think the cost will go down as we mature as an organization, as governance structures start to take shape, as investments start to materialize in or security investments in our traditional technology portfolios. I think it's the exact inverse. So that's just a provocative statement that I think I would pose to people to think about. I don't think the costs increase over time. I think they'll come down over time. And in fact, we've seen that. The other thing was to tie in the conversation around cybersecurity and all the questions around the use of technology to manage the risk in our industrial environments to something Sandy said and a number of people have said in the keynotes. The way that we're going in the industry is towards the it just works mentality. Less about technology things and more about services. So how many people have their iPhones with them or their BlackBerries? Probably everybody. And most of you would concede that the anxiety level of losing these phones is pretty high. So you'd consider the operational importance of this particular device pretty serious. Now, how many application whitelisting solutions do you have on this? How many field firewalls do you have on this? How many pieces of software that you see in all of these things, SIMs, do you see in this? So you're an operator, and you'd have to pay for that solution somehow. How many of these things do you see in something that you use to operate your daily life every day? Now, they may be in there, but you're being charged for it without knowing all of the stuff that exists. So I don't know by adding more stuff is going to solve the problem. So I think we're at a precipice in the industry where we're going to have to make a decision as a community whether we're going to consistently stick our fingers in the dike and possibly bail out water in perpetuity, or we stop for a second and we think about what's coming next. And let's work and kind of marshal our combined neurons to secure by design the it just works industrial revolution that's ahead of us. So again, we can have the whole conversation about when to apply whitelisting and what value proposition firewalls add to managing risk. That's fine. That's a healthy conversation. But if we only had an hour to talk about securing industrial infrastructure tomorrow, I would surmise that we may want to consider leaving a little bit of that conversation behind and thinking together about what's ahead. Probably wrong, sorry, but.
Just a small comment. I think we may be oversimplifying the challenge. You have about $200 billion of installed control systems out there that need to be managed between now and about 20 years from now. Hopefully 20 years from now when they will get displaced. So those systems need to be managed. And I don't think you were implying that we don't need to manage those systems. We do. I think you agree that we do. The second premise that we can expect that ABB, Honeywell, Reemphasize, Rockwell, and the rest will go out there and provide you field instrumentation to ERP, all in one package, secure, would be awesome, but show me a site that has all various aspects of automation from a single vendor, and I show you an opportunity to have an iPhone-like solution. It would be fantastic. It really would be. It would be seamlessly integrated, but polymers don't behave the same way as electrons do. So.
Anybody else have a comment? Thank you, Tyler, for you made it controversial. That's good. I like that. Anybody else want to comment on it?
I want to comment on the previous piece, on the policy. And I think policy did come a long way in the last couple of years. We're seeing, so it's trivial when you talk to companies, it's trivial that they're trying to harden their computers and DMZ between the IT and the OT networks. But one of the fundamental things that I think is missing, that you said that you need to configure the devices to be secured. And the fact is that most of the devices, and perhaps the most critical devices, which are the industrial controllers, simply cannot be secured because they were designed before the cybersecurity was even called cybersecurity. So I think that's the main gap that policy cannot help with. That there's no other choice but to implement other measures to monitor these types of equipment.
Any questions out there? Any questions in the audience? I don't want to dominate here.
I had one. Tyler got me thinking. I've been watching some of the Internet of Things and the industrial Internet of Things. You talked about the cell phones. The vision that I've heard expressed for the Internet of Things and for the industrial Internet of Things is that every device will be like a cell phone in the sense that it is an Internet appliance. It's connected to the Internet all of the time. And my question is, if we had, forget state of the practice, if we had a state-of-the-art Internet of Things design and applied that to the safety system for a cat cracking tower, and we produced an Internet appliance that would be part of that safety system, and we deployed it on the cell network so that packets from all over the Internet could reach it, is that a good idea? Is that really where we want to go, and why?
I'm not sure anyone has the answer to that. I think what you're hearing from end user organizations like ourselves is yes. The business cases will be different. The risks and the tolerance of risks may be different depending on what industry you're in. But I'm not sure it's anything but inevitable. And I'm not going to crystal ball as to when these types of technologies will exist in an industrial plant, but I guess my question was really whether we want to keep bolting on security in perpetuity, which is a costly exercise. We've been through it. And if you force me, I can tell you what we've done on the other side, which is all this stuff. But I was hoping to try and get away from that. It's been 10 years and we're still talking about it. But I don't know the answer to that. But if we can get to that answer, if we can get the end user community from all industrial sectors to get a technology strategy that is cohesive, that is tied to a business case, as Nate mentioned pretty coherently, there's an opportunity here for us to use the value of business, the economics, to drive security as an investment, to create value with more resilience and reliability. But the value is still not in the security conversation. It's still a cost. It's still an afterthought. So if you can find a way to tie it into the value of new technology adoption, whatever that looks like, I think the sales challenges that you're probably all having selling me kit and stuff might go away. If you can have a whole story about predictive analytics and preventative maintenance, those big dollars for Shell and other oil and gas companies, security has to be in that. We know inherently to open up connections remotely to our rotating equipment implies a cyber risk. So if you can find a way to tie into the value proposition of allowing us to do preventative maintenance and remote analytics by having security built in as a service, as simple as this, we've got something to talk about. But if you want me to add 17 firewalls and 14 different network segments, I don't know how to manage that. And I don't know how to cost that today. You might say it's cheap because some sales guy will say, here's a $25 firewall, it's easy. But managing the total cost of ownership of that over a number of periods of years is a little different. I'll stop now.
Let me just qualify this for a second. I like all the discussion. I like discussions. But if we just talk about legacy systems, because that's a separate use case than what you just said. I understand now the issue now is we're starting to put IoT stuff in but set that aside. Just talk about the fact, I guess my first question really, because I wasn't anticipating that, but was really, if you take the legacy systems that are out there. Personally, I deal with suppliers every day, and I think they're building systems with the right security in it to a point. They have firewalls, they structure it, they zone it. I trust that they do. I may be wrong. I'm not buying them, but I trust they do. But the problem is all the ones that are out there, and there's a lot of systems out there, and how you have to protect them. That's different than the IoT type of thing. I'd be the first to agree with you about the IoT type thing, I think. So with respect to that, do you think that there is still a security gap, or do you think that they've put in enough to protect them? I mean, obviously, many of you sell things, so they're going to need your thing. I understand that, but I don't want to discount that.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks, Sid. So Tyler, I think, going forward, I think there's a lot of opportunity to build security in. I think if you see, the migration, the adoption of things like enterprise service buses for different types of architectures, you have a lot of technology going back into the cloud, data analytics, so on and so forth. You have, federated access control. You have, all these kind of more classic IT technologies we're starting to leverage and bolt on. Now, we still have a massive industrial install base, whether it be manufacturing, pharma, oil and gas, power gen, you name it. 40% of all cyber attacks last year were directed at the energy sector, second only to financials. So to think that we're going to get away by leaving our systems exposed as they are today, while at the same time connecting them, we're wrong. And so that's something that we have to recognize. So we do have something we need to take action on. We need to take action immediately. Going forward, yes, we need to think cognizantly about how we develop technology, how we build security in, and how we manage that security throughout the life cycle of the product. Actually, I'll let you go. Go ahead.
You're doing a great job, Nate. The only thing I'd like to add is to reemphasize the legacy systems that exist. Based on ARC studies, there's approximately 200 billion, that's with a B, $billion of installed assets out there. They need to be secured. They include assets from 1975. Automation assets, that's only the DCS. That doesn't include the field instrumentation. It doesn't include the MES layer. That is what is running the world's infrastructure today. That's what is producing gas in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Persian Gulf, and elsewhere in the world. That's what's generating power, that's running the electricity here. And there is a big gap. There's a huge gap. We had a gentleman from DuPont stand here today, and he told us that he's been asked to make miracles without any budget. He's good. Eric is good. I spent some time with him. He's a very smart guy. He knows what he's doing. But at the end of the day, you at least have to buy a firewall after you buy the PAS software. So the challenges are there. We can't ignore them. And I really and truly applaud the notion that we must move on. You look at our industry. I come from big automation background many years ago, 23 years ago. They have absolutely no incentive to disrupt themselves. You're asking them to cut off their own legs. They're not going to do it. The innovation is not going to come from them. Ford, GM, Chrysler were not the ones who bring about disruptive technology either in electric vehicles or autonomous vehicles. They're coming along, but the disruptors are Tesla and people like them. So don't look to our automation vendors for that kind of solution. That's one aspect. The other aspect is to get into this business, the barriers to entry are massive, and the market size relative to the rest of the economy is small. Automation vendors now, I'd be the last person to defend the automation vendors. There's not a lot of margin on what they do. So what motivation do they have to go and disrupt? It's going to come from small company, and the small companies need the likes of Shell, ExxonMobil, DuPont, Dow, and others to be open to working with smaller, agile companies.
I want to add one thing, and I couldn't agree more about what you said about creating value and not just security. And I think we're in a good position, we as the industry, that the ICS security and operations network management was neglected for so long, unlike the IT networks, that we have a real opportunity to bring both security and management operational value. And I think the fundamental layer when you want to monitor a network, either from an operational perspective or security perspective, is provide visibility into what's going on within the network. And I'll give an example from the IT side of the networks. So if you have an HP OpenView, an asset management system, something that monitors and knows exactly what's going on within each of the Windows machines and updating patches on them, is that operation tool or is that a security tool? So it can be obviously both. It can ensure you that no patches or perhaps viruses or malwares were installed on your Windows machines, but it also assists you in patch management and saves you time by automating operations. So I think we have a great opportunity to provide the same tools for the OT networks, for the ICS industry, to provide tools that both can monitor what's going on and provide security alerts, but also help automate operations and create backups of your changes to help you manage your networks, thus creating value and lowering the total cost, essentially.
So as Eddie said, yeah, there's a huge install base. Huge install base that I think one cannot ignore that needs to take care of. And, you know, so how, and it's like 10 years, you know, like behind the IT environment, maybe more. Where do you start? Where do you start? Do you start with protecting down there, the PLCs? Do you start with protecting the Windows, the HMIs? Where do you start? Would you start with patching, with finding a secure remote access mechanism, with anomaly detection, with all kinds of advanced tools? It's a question that I think that all enterprises are up against. And each one is taking its own solution. Some of them that we see will start with things like what you do, folks, like anomaly detection and work like that, and start with the lower levels. And some will start with more kind of a security policy for the whole organization. What would they like to see as a process, as a cycle that improves over time? And we'll start with simple things that presented by MIT just an hour ago, saying that in most cases the actual issues are with patches that are still not installed. Okay, so simple things, patching. Patching can become a very, very, either it's flashing or my jet lag is really hitting me.
It's not your jet lag. It's not your jet lag. No, you probably have jet lag.
So what we, at least in our approach, is to go from the management, the security management point of view, and go then deeper into the Purdue model, and help to secure things gradually, either doing things ourselves or cooperating with other vendors out there in the field. But I believe that we cannot ignore the install base and just go, you know, behind it and start something completely new.
I hope nobody took away from my comments the fact that I would be ignoring our install base. I put it out there as a thought experiment to avoid another 10 years of this panel providing problem statements to you. So I'm going to give you my view on the solution side of things, having done this now for a few years. So yes, there is a legacy install base we have to deal with. We have thousands of equipment, pieces of equipment, tens of thousands of machines, Windows installations. We've got, I would say, dozens of different business units with, you know, vastly different business priorities, dozens of different network architectures, and hundreds of different suppliers. So a non-trivial problem, extraordinarily non-trivial problem. The only way we looked at approaching a solution to the problem is to find some signal in the noise. And there's a lot of noise about how to do this properly. So in order for us to do that, the first approach, the first step we took was to figure out how do we motivate behavior in our organization. Both financial investment behavior, how do we compel investment in security, a traditional cost center, and how do we embrace the adoption in the businesses with people? How do we motivate their behavior to not just install a firewall and see it as a piece of equipment that somebody in IT manages? So the first issue was, instead of talking about cyber risk, how do we compel an investment value out of cybersecurity? So instead of treating it as a cybersecurity problem and approaching our investment portfolio holders as we're going to protect ourselves from the bad guys and throw all the stats at them, we said, do you want to do more with the systems that you have? Nate mentioned about opening up even traditional and legacy systems to new to the internet, to new areas of business so that we can leverage those new connections to drive new business value? The answer is yes. They want to do more with the systems they have. They want to sweat the assets. That doesn't mean they're not going to take advantage of new technology opportunities. So if you treat cybersecurity as an opportunity cost, the conversation is a little easier to have. Do you want to go remote? Do you want to do more automated? Do you want to do unmanned? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so to do that, do you think that we need to introduce some basic security principles? The answer is yes. So that's on one side. The gentleman from PAS mentioned about the alignment with safety. How better motivate individual behavior than by tying your investment to helping our people get home safe at night? So if you have an intrusion or an unintended disruption in one of our plants, we look at that as a possible safety issue. So by tying the investment in cybersecurity to safety, but not just process safety, reducing the risk or reducing the likelihood of an effluent release or a hydrocarbon release. No, it's a matter of getting our people home safe at night. Then you start to pull at the heartstrings of the people who are going to be responsible for maintaining these systems that we deploy. So first, spend some time winning the hearts and minds of the people who are going to fund this, which probably only have $1 to spend, and you're going to need 10,000. And the people who are going to be imposing new processes, new procedures, new governance structures, new work instructions, new vendors. Spend a year doing that first. And I'll leave it with one more. There's a whole bunch I could talk about. I'll stop talking after. The next one is, if you think that there's value in 165 security controls that exist in all of our standards that we come up with, do 5 of them. Just do 5 of them first, embed them, operationalize them, work with your suppliers, align the whole lifecycle value chain from procurement, through project deployment, through run and maintain, through decommissioning. Get those 5, whatever they are, pick the cheapest if you need to, do them well, then the cost of the next shiny object becomes less, and the procedures are in place to operationalize that far more effectively. So if you just do those 5 things well and avoid the next conversation of shiny objects, I think you'll be able to have some success. We did, and I'm happy to talk about it afterwards if you'd like. Now I'll stop.
Let me, and Tyler, your other point, I think, stirs this too, because it's an issue here. You know, one of the things I see as an analyst is this, and I think everybody agrees, this lack of expertise, cybersecurity expertise, that companies have struggled to maintain their systems. I think that's a fact. You all can comment on that if you don't think, but 2 sides to that. One is, can we do something with tools to help people manage that? I think there's a lack of that as well, personally. That's one thing. But the other thing is, your point, I think, is well taken. If we may be just sticking our heads in the sand, saying, because I see it all the time, too. Everybody's just chasing their tails. And you can only do that so long. And if you don't have the expertise, all the expertise you get, you're going to keep consuming doing that. You're never going to catch up. So at some point you have to say, will I ever have the resources? Will I ever have the capabilities to maintain it? And if not, then I do have to completely change my thought process and really focus incredibly on more secure devices. That's what we would call them. So
Can I take
whoever
a
would
shot
like
at
that.
this? There's a trick I learned long time ago when I was doing engineering work, and that is you can solve any problem in the world with people, technology, and processes. The focus seems to be primarily on technology, processes, which are standards and methods, and very little on people. And it is an issue. It is an issue both on the supplier side as well as on the end user side. That needs to be addressed. It needs to be taken seriously. I think you have crossed that path when you start seeing universities offering cybersecurity courses, when companies proactively, as Tyler put it very nicely, training their people to view cybersecurity similar to safety. When you walk to work, every place I've been says safety first. Maybe we should now say cybersecurity and safety first.
I think that's an excellent point. So, listen, we all realize that IT is moving from back office to boardroom, whether it be in the industrials, whether it be in manufacturing, and so on. IT is now seen as a business enabler, a revenue generator, and it's moving away from a cost center it was traditionally. So I'm going to take off my World Tech hat for a minute and put on my GE hat, because I'm part of GE Digital. So we're the digital industrial, and we take this, we've taken this very seriously. We identified many years ago that there was a big opportunity in the industrial if you could go digital, but we also identified that there was a big problem with talent. And so one of the things that we did was we started investing in different universities. Carnegie Mellon is a great example, putting together programs, enabling students to learn about the industrials, learn about cybersecurity in those environments. And what we started to see is the folks coming out now, we do co-ops, we do things of that nature, they start to appreciate the intricacies, the interesting operational constraints that exist in the industrials, in the real-time systems, in the critical systems. And it's actually, you know, I love our commercials because, you know, we're not just working on trains, we're actually working on systems that optimize trains, but we're still running code, and our code is doing something. And so I think we've seen a real positive uptake with our programs, and I just encourage companies to continue to invest in those areas and build that talent at the university level.
Can I do
Yeah, please.
a quick follow-up? Friend of ours stood up here earlier, guy I respect very much, and said, aside from you, you're not my only friend, said, Industry 4.0 and IIoT. Look, we are going through an industrial revolution, the fourth phase. This is going to be bigger than anything we have ever seen. If you thought James Watt's steam machine, steam engine, was incredible and transformed the world, or if you thought electricity transformed the world, if you thought the mainframe computer transformed the world, wait and see. In our own lifetime, in the next 20 years, we're going to see significant growth in every aspect, things we've never imagined. We just aren't prepared for it. I think we'll get there. I think the momentum will get us there. It's just a matter of time. Companies like GE, I got to plug them in, are going in the right direction. That is one company that really has taken a different angle to this whole thing, and acting, I can't believe I'm saying this for Giant, acting more entrepreneurial than the other giants in the marketplace.
I want to relate to the personnel question, and you mentioned that do we lack cybersecurity experts in ICS networks? So I have to say I disagree with that. I think that our best partners are usually the automation engineers that are responsible for cybersecurity. So I think it's a matter of decision within the organizations of putting the responsibility, because perhaps it's not a popular opinion, but understanding cybersecurity, especially in the ICS network state, is not that complicated. You need to understand automation much more than you need to understand cybersecurity. So the fact is that, again, if an organization decides, okay, we have the budget, we find technology, now let's put someone in charge. I personally think better if it's someone from the automation process, and the fact that they are in charge, they will learn about the subject more, and there's, again, not a lot to learn. So just putting responsible people, or people who care about security, I think that will go a long way in the facilities.
What we see is that in many cases, the cybersecurity project will start with the IT personnel at the headquarters, and then as Tyler referred to, there's a process to kind of convince the field to adapt. And the way to do that in many cases is for them to see value. Value for the plant, value for their process, for the operation. And in that sense, I must say that every time we do another project, we learn a lot from the OT people at the plants, how that combine together with the IT people that come with their processes and ideas from the central office, and together there is a result. On the kind of the, we take the approach of participating, whether it is the MIT activity that Michael is spending time, Michael Coden, my colleague here, is spending time there, also the industrial critical infrastructure framework, on the national, domestic US level, but also even within our own small organization, doing ISO 27001, doing all kinds of security courses in-house, so we can also put our own contribution into when we come to customers, we know better about what we are speaking about.
Jeff, do you have any comments?
I could make comment in a lot of different directions. 6 or 7 years ago, when we would sit down with, owners and operators in critical infrastructure, many times the IT folks wouldn't be able to find the control systems folks to even produce them for a meeting. We've been to very large-scale operations in which automated systems were installed and simply worked, and nobody actually ever took a time to record exactly how they were installed and how they were going to be fixed if they broke. Thankfully, I think those days are passing us by as we continue to delve and work with asset owners on security matters. From a training perspective, I will say that the knowledge base of those folks that are coming out and going through our training has really risen over just the last few years. The knowledge base is really there. It might be because a rising tide lifts all boats, as they say. There's a lot of more attention given to professional certifications in cybersecurity, and especially when it comes to control systems. From a DHS perspective, there is a big effort going on to codify that, to say, okay, we're going to encourage not just that activity, the certifying, but right now I'm sitting or working with an interagency security committee that is working on basics of cyber hygiene, not just from control system level, but from an IT level. We're working on cyber skill sets. I don't know how many folks in this room have sat on endless panels trying to identify what core skills are in control systems. I think we make an effort at that about every other year in some regard or another with some body or another. We know what we want to get at, but we always argue over how we're going to get there. But you're going to see more of this. And with the use of our cybersecurity evaluation tool, if you saw my presentation yesterday, right at the end, I put up a slide that showed what we were finding. And from a attack surface level, get your junk off the internet is one of the things we say. We keep it simple. It's very simple. If it doesn't need to be out there on the street, talking to everybody, get rid of it, or lock it down. From a skill set, yes, there is a lot more available in the way of training nowadays, and the employees that we're seeing are a lot more skilled. The organizations that we work with have a lot more, they're a lot more in touch with what needs to be done. You mentioned finding 5 things, that you need to do. Our tool will actually help you do that. It gives you a top 20 when you're done with it. It says, these are your top 20 based upon the standard set that you chose. And ignore the other 15. Exactly.
Pick 5, yeah.
So we're getting there. I'll be a cheerleader there.
I have to say one thing about the tool, which is a great initiative, and I really liked what you did, but I attended the last ICS JWG, and in the entrance to the conference room, we had a bunch of CDs with the tool. And essentially, you're asking people to take a CD and bypass all those firewalls, DMZ, etc., and just plug it into the DCS or SCADA network. So just following up on what we talked about
You plugged yours
earlier.
in 8 minutes later, I happen to know.
So I don't have a CD player anymore in my computers, but yeah, I know what I will do in the next ICS one. I will bring my own CDs to the. So.
It's freely available from DHS, and you can trust us. No,
Sure, yeah,
it's
sure.
run alone. Our tool does not report back anything to DHS. Don't worry.
But yeah, no one could ever attack a government system, right?
That's-
Put it in fire.
It's just a question set.
Tyler, do you have any comments or no?
I'll concede my soapbox time to an audience question if there is one.
Is there one from the audience? Yeah.
One of the things I think that, Sid, you showed in your chart, and you raised as a concern area, was the issue of a lot of the cybersecurity issues are at the local level. And I was wondering, what are you seeing, particularly for large geographically distributed global organizations? Are they seeing ways to start to do a better job of centrally managing and centrally controlling and centrally improving things? Is that a direction you're seeing?
Tyler, that's
well,
one
we're a pretty large,
perfect for you.
distributed end user organization. Yeah, I think our findings or the reality of how we manage security in Shell aligns up with what Sid's data is showing us. To synthesize a number of strategic themes, we look at the rules and the tools being developed in the center, and the operationalizing and maintaining of those are in the field. Now, the businesses do things differently. Upstream and downstream manage the rules and the tools a little differently. They have different governance structures. That's fine. At the end of the day, as long as they implement the rules and the tools in a standard fashion so that we can view the conformance, I won't say compliance, but the conformance to those rules and the tools, then we can start to make good investment decisions. So when we get those 5 things in place everywhere in the world, our ability to figure out what the 6th will be is actually quite different than it is today. But yeah, we see local implementation, and we think that's the best way to do it.
Okay, let me ask, is there another question from the floor? I mean, I'm sorry, I have my back to everybody here. I'll stand over here, so I don't have my back to you, but nobody's raising their hand anyhow, but.
Not Andrew, not Andrew.
I'm just kidding. Just another issue, for me, I'm very interested in, and maybe even the suppliers can comment on this somewhat, but has to do with services. A couple years ago when we were discussing this issue, I thought the natural answer to a lot of the cybersecurity expertise issues. Now, I understand what everybody said there about the expertise, and one thing is to have somebody that can do patches and things like that. Another thing is whenever there's an incident, to actually isolate the incident and find it, take it out, do those kind of things. And I always thought that was something that would be managed services of some type. And I know some companies do have agreements with people to manage their cybersecurity. One big company I know of in particular. And they do it with automation companies. But I'm just wondering if you're seeing that yourself or from a supplier perspective, is that something you want to provide, or do you see an opportunity there? I think it's a big opportunity, a big growth area, but not necessarily for everybody on the stage there by any means, but.
Sure,
GE.
so I'll take that, Sid. So in my role as CTO for product cybersecurity at GE, we have, we're in a lot of countries, we make a lot of products. One of our core edicts, if you will, is security serviceable products. Now, what does that mean? So if we think about what's worked well in IT, some may say well, not well, but it's a statement of fact. What works in IT is patching. Right? We all appreciate that. We have Patch Tuesday followed by Exploit Wednesday. And so we all focus, we've got our IT teams, we run, we patch. In the industrials, specifically in the big spinning equipment, machinery, things of that nature, we're not talking about patching, right? Those typically equate to firmware updates. Now, systems, the usual problem, can't take them offline, operational constraints, health, safety, environment considerations, so on. And so one of the things we really look at is how do we service those machines in situ while they're running for security vulnerabilities? And what products do we need to install to enable that to be a reality? After we install those products, who is going to manage that? And so, again, what we see is the opportunity to leverage the back-end SOCs that we have for our own facilities in our 157 countries to provide it as a value-add service to our install base, to our customers, the ability to manage security remotely on big spinning equipment, on trains, on CTs, on MRs, and provide updates as needed while those systems are operational. And I think it's we'll talk about it more tomorrow. We're hosting a lunch. We'll go into detail because it's a real win, and we see a lot of move forward in the industry as a result. But I think it is a huge issue, and it's something that we're very cognizant of again.
And let me just clarify for my own benefit. When you say that, because one thing is some companies say, well, we'll just provide you manpower. They're looking to provide manpower services, that's classic services. What you just described, which I really like, is more, we're going to build tools to enable us to do that service. We're going to do it from a remote place. I mean, it's a combination of tools to enable you to do things remotely as well as then providing that act as a
Absolutely.
service.
You can think of it as a product-enabled service business. So GE is a service-based company. Yes, we sell big products. We are masters at servicing those products. That's our business. That's what we do. We treat cybersecurity the same way. We'll give you a device that enables us to perform updates, to perform patches in line, to do effectively those same measures, but do it remotely if you wish, or we can centralize it at a SOC of your choice.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to comment?
Yeah.
Shmulik? Yeah.
So actually, what we do at Next9 is we provide a platform, an OT security and operation management platform, which you can look at kind of a services generation platform, a platform on top of which a service provider can provide a service, either as an MSSP, managed security service provider, as mentioned before in the case of Shell, or either a system integration kind of service. But we actually enable you as a channel. In our go-to-market, by the way, is a channel go-to-market. So we are actually not directly, let's say, marketing to or selling to the end users, but rather enabling the big players that probably those end customers would like to buy from, like the system integrators, the vendors themselves, in many cases, is providing 80% of the equipment for a specific tier 2 enterprise would be the excellent provider, the usual suspect to provide such a service. But what we believe very much in that direction, and we believe that there are enough players out there that are interested to take a bite of that market. In some of the cases, and that's the decision of the enterprise, how much do they want to do themselves, and how much do they want to outsource? Is it only the consulting portion of the, how do I protect my environment? Is it the system integration of the full solution? Is it a full MSSP solution? What would you like to do in-house, and what would you like to outsource? At the end of the day, it's the decision of the enterprise.
Okay.
Sid, let me see if I can just tie in a comment I made earlier about the value proposition to your question. How many of the audience are end users? Doesn't seem to be that many.
Yeah.
Probably not in oil and gas, maybe you are, but I'm sure this comment might represent multiple industries. How many of you have CapEx problems right now? Right, exact same hands go up. Managed security services should be sold as an advantage, both as a revenue recognition from your side, because you get to wonderfully recognize revenue on PO as opposed to product distribution. On our side, it helps us manage our budgets. It helps us use available cash as opposed to the traditional CapEx investment for a piece of equipment that you're going to tell us is a firewall. We have to figure out maintenance costs, license fees, and so forth. So there's an advantage to managed security services. But please try not to think about it as a better security widget or a better security mechanism. It's a financial advantage for us and will help us adopt your services better. So I'd just like to make sure everyone's aware. As a service, managed security services has a big compelling value for end users, but it isn't in better security. That should be seen as a byproduct. There's a financial benefit there to focus on.
Okay. Are there any questions? Any other questions? Did you have a question? No? Okay. All right, because you had asked before, and I didn't give you a chance. Well, sure. No, we only allow easy ones. I'm not up there. You could ask us tough.
Well, I call it a tough question because this is a question that I hear time and time again from executives. And the question is, if I give any one of you or anybody else X dollars for increased cybersecurity, how do I determine that I've gotten more than X dollars of value from it?
I love the silence on the stage here. What's the value of one additional firewall, please? I won't. I have an answer, but maybe we can talk offline because the way we determine things like that involve threat scenarios and consequences, which have numbers and figures to them. So there's ways to do that. But I love the question, by the way.
So,
Go ahead, Eddie. Eddie, did you want to answer?
Yes, the same way you did safety. The same exact way you justify safety expenditure. You do it for risk mitigation and you do it for compliance. There was a time when safety instrumented systems were not so popular. They were not put in at every furnace, but there were regulation. OSHA 1910 came about. It became mandatory, and people saw the wisdom in it. So it is risk mitigation and regulations.
I suggested more regulation last year. Didn't get chased out of the room.
I know better than to bring up more regulations. I was just saying.
This is a question for Tyler. Tyler, this goes back to the secure development. Now, this is an easy one. You have to nod your head. I definitely like that you brought up the secure development in the technology, but I like a technology gap that leads to a security gap because that's our technology development curve. That's the innovation. So could you just elaborate a little bit more on your thinking around that? I kind of think it's like cops and robbers, right? The robbers get better technology than the cops do, and this isn't a traditional technology trajectory. We got to be evolving in ways people don't understand, don't you think? I just wanted to tie that together.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I'm grasping the question there.
Well, just specifically, you talked about in your business with secure development, we continue to innovate and have new technology, but that's got to be behind the scenes. We don't want people to know what we're innovating, right?
Do you not want people? Well, perhaps. I mean, if you want to open up your technology roadmap, you are by definition exposing that technology to people who would look to break it. But I don't think that's avoidable. I think that's, in order to get innovation, you need to have an open platform. I mean, Shell, one of the things we used to say is we're not a security company, and yet we have a pretty big security practice, and we've always wanted to get back to having affordable and credible energy delivery to our customers and less businesses around security. And to do that, we found we had to work with our suppliers and open up our expectations and our technology roadmaps to everyone supplying us equipment, people, system integrators installing our equipment and commissioning that. I really don't know if we can get away with a technology vision around the use of drones or data and analytics without opening up possible vulnerabilities for people to exploit. We'll rely on you as suppliers to figure out how to manage those exploits without introducing more stuff for us. I don't know if that answered your question. I don't think it's avoidable that we, open up ourselves in any technology innovation to possible future exploits. And I'm not sure if you're saying that's a good idea. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad one either.
I didn't know if that answered my question.
It didn't answer your question.
It did.
Oh, okay.
Said it did.
All right.
All right, I think we've punished you guys enough. I think you've been up there for almost an hour. I apologize for that. But anyhow, would you join me in thanking the panel here?
Thank you.